wife was listening and watching. She called me up immediately. There are only two conditions that I and your children, we had three then, no? 3 boys, want to impose on you. One is do not surrender, and second, do not be captured.
We had 12 regional commands. And before midnight, I was able to place a call to all of them to tell them what was going on. Of course, the instructors in general were to join us against President Marcos and General Ben, Renato Villa. I had to tell him, General Rene, this is what's happening. Be sure that they are with you, and you must stop any contrary action by the armed forces of the national police. Villa followed these instructions to the letter, and eventually was able to move out his reserve battalion to support us. In the case of Del Butang, he is a really aggressive officer. He sort of jumped the gun by hijacking the first Philippine Airlines passenger airliner in Cotabato. Quietly asked the passengers to move out, took over the crew, loaded his 150 men, and told them to fly to Manila. Pigliamo Air Base was not yet secured by us. And so when he landed there, he was immediately surrounded by the people of the commanding general of the Philippine Air Force, who was sympathetic to Salazar.
Now, my principle has been the enemy of my enemy is my ally. So we decided to go there and support them.
Whatever they contribute will be welcome. We need all the support that we can get.
I said, okay, we will call the people. We went to Isip and Cubao, and maybe the last 15 minutes, thousands came before midnight.
Tuloy-tuloy yung panawagan ni Cardinal C noong 22 ng gabi.
I am indeed concerned about the situation of Minister ENRILE and General Ramos. I am calling our people to be around at Camp Aguinaldo to show your solidarity and your support in this very crucial period when our two good friends have shown their idealism. Let us pray to our Blessed Lady to help us in order that we can solve this problem peacefully.
Sumagot si Cory Aquino. Nanawagan si Cory Aquino.
I call on our people to rally to Camp Aguinaldo and Camp Crame in a show of people's power and solidarity with General Ramos and Minister ENRILE.
Pero nung lumabas yung daliri ng piloto, dalawang daliri niyang laban sa akin, aba, so kakampi pala ito.
Then Taiwan,
And all of them.
And that was the turning point.
defections started happening, young officers, entire units.
I had one conversation with President Marcos. He said, I'm sorry, Mr. President, Anong, you're too late. That was the
Nagpapasalamat sa inyo lahat, sa inyong tangkilig sa akin, sa loob ng 20 taon, at ngayon ika-21 taon. Before lunchtime, all these television stations went out, and President Marcos was off the air.
From that time on, we already got our news.
So we had control over all the television broadcast stations in the country. They contact Jimmy and Queen, was very close to Cory Aquino, to sound them off in the organization of the provisional government. Cory will be the president.
with that flight.
Then, punta kami doon sa taking ni Cory, nanumpa siya, pinasumpa rin ako na Secretary of National Defense, ganun din si Eddie, as Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces. I was told that President Marcos was on the telephone. I said, Johnny, I said, why don't you take the government and run it the way you want it? And I will just remain an honorary president. I said, Mr. President, that's too late.
I'm pretty sure that stirred up a lot of memories and a lot of emotions from all of us here. I think most of us here were old enough and were in the Philippines during this very crucial time in our history. I think I was 10 years old at that time, but all I remember was it was a fun time for the kids. No school. we were all in one house with our cousins, with our brothers, sisters. Little did we know that, you know, my parents, my uncles, everyone was off to the streets and were in actual danger during that period. So our next portion of the evening is, we invited 3 people to give testimonials about their personal experience during this period. We'll start off with Mr. Willie Dwight.
Since I worked for the First Lady, Imelda Marcos, as Artistic Director for the Cultural Center and the Folk Arts Theater for 15 years. I started when I was 26 years old. And had left my post, or was out of my post, I was 36 years old. My story is basically focused at the Malacanang grounds. One of my assignments under the table of the First Lady is to design, since I'm the director for design for the CCP, Focus, and basically all the events of Malacanang, not all, but basically all, that has something to do with state affairs. My immediate assignment for a particular event was to design the Quirino Grandstand. That's where it's supposed to be the original site wherein the president would take his oath. But 2 o'clock in the morning of February 22, I got myself a radio, since I live in Los Baños, in Makiling, to come down to the CCP as soon as possible. So I said, this must probably be a change of design, which the First Lady didn't like. Oftentimes, it's Mrs. Marcos who would say, it's too trouble, it's too, you know, give it more, give it more that. So I would just have to do it because it's a command. So I went to CCP. It was definitely dark and closed. So I went to Folk Arts. It was only the security guard. So I went to my office at Folk Arts and worked on some concept of the designs, because that was what I had in mind, this redesign assignment. But it was not just redesign, it was change of venue. It was at the Malacanang grounds. So as early as 6 o'clock, I attempted to get to Viola, but there were a lot of soldiers and barricades. So I just had to leave my car and walk from San Beda, Holy Spirit, to St. Jude, and I could not enter the grounds anymore. So I noticed the Green Revolution Garden of Mrs. Marcos, which is basically a show-off garden of vegetables. That was basically uprooted. And there were soldiers, all Rambo-looking, you know, more than 100 of them. And branches of trees were already cut. And I know that that's a no-no in the palace ground, that no branch is supposed to be cut. But it was cut. They were limbless trees for security, I believe. And so the secretary came over and said, Mr. Buhay, you have just had to make a new design. So I was there for around 3 hours, and I saw officers, cabinet members, people of rank, all going inside the palace. And I said, what's happening? Don't you know, it's already getting to be very hot. I said, I could imagine that, but so far, I had to go on with my assignment because The engineers of the palace were just asking me to rush the designs. Chairs were to be put in order, flags, and so forth. But I couldn't bring down the big portrait of the president, which was already hanging at the Quirino grandstand. So I said, if she asks for it, let's say I cannot deliver. You know, but I never saw Mrs. Marcos from the time, even the president. And we were barred from going to the palace proper. We were just there as far as the rotunda. And I saw several officers said, you better go home. Go home. And that's what I did. I went back to CCP, it was closed, and FOCARS was completely closed. So that's my story. And as I said, it's different because I checked the area of the EDSA where the million people were there, and it was really impossible. You could just see the humanity there. So I just had to satisfy myself to get to my place, which took me 8 hours instead of 2 hours.
Next, may I call on ALVAR Rosales? Al is our admin officer here at the consulate.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. EDSA 1986, I was there. During those fateful days of February 23 to 25, joining a throng of thousands who wanted change, wanted freedom and peace. Hearing and heeding the call of Cardinal Sin, summoning people to go to EDSA to give moral support, food and supplies to the beleaguered then Defense Secretary Juan Ponce Enrile and AFP Vice Chief Fidel Ramos, who encamped themselves in Camp Aguinaldo and Camp Crame, along with several members of the military top brass, including the now Vice Presidential Ringo Honasan. After bolting out from the Marcos administration a week earlier, I gathered a group of friends and neighbors to go to EDSA. Young and spirited, daring to exploit the freshness of youth, I was determined to be at EDSA. I used every trick in the book, so to speak, to convince around 20 people, including my brother, to join me. And I remember telling them, halika nga, punta tayo sa EDSA, maraming chicks doon. Magaganda at mapuputi, referring to residents of neighboring post subdivisions, White Plains, Corinthian Garden, and Forbes Park. So with bottles of mineral water in our bags, off we went. The 20 or so of us started to trek about a distance of 10 kilometers from Sampaloc, Manila to Cubao, Quezon City. Singing and chanting on our way, we were joined by students, children and adults from all walks of life. Our group swelling to around hundreds as we inch our way closer to EDSA. And we were met by equally enthusiastic and fired up administrators who were already in the area. There were thousands of people milling around. Some were singing, shouting, chanting slogans. But a more prominent view was a group of nuns clutching their rosaries and reciting prayers. Our first real encounter with government troops occurred in the early morning of February 24. Marines lobbed tear gas at us. We scampered to different directions, only to return after the smoke had cleared. That noontime of February 24 marked a very significant part of my life, as the eyes of death were actually and directly staring at me. I was part of a group of young and innocent civilians, most of whom I believe were in the area just for the sake of fun, frontally facing a temporarily immobilized tank. There was a row of people separating me from the tank, which I could actually touch with a slight extension of my arm. But like anybody else in the group was thinking perhaps, I was confident that the tank would not roll. But that feeling of confidence would soon disappear. As the tank before me and the tanks around us started to roar. And then fear gradually crept into my consciousness. I thought of my mom, my poor mom, who is not even aware I was at EDSA. I thought of my brother, who a day earlier was with me in the area. And believe me, at that moment I was thankful that I was alone. If I were to perish, my mom would only mourn the death of a son, not two. And I said to myself, so this is it. I stood firmly, closed my eyes and my palms, ready to accept my fate. Silence, at least among those occupying the first three rows near the tank, pervaded the atmosphere. I started to mumble my prayers, but in between these prayers, I counted silently, still hoping that after 30 agonizing minutes, the tanks would not roll. And the rest is history.
Next, may I invite Peter Ruben Salazar to give his personal experience.
My testimonial is a little bit different because, like Alina, I was only 12 years old at that time. 12 years old at the time that Marcos was elected president of the Philippines. So I'll let you compute. And I was talking to Consul General CALONGE at the Asian Lunar New Year event and told him that that was the best years at UP, 1969. So if any one of you have heard of Pastor Messina. Pastor Messina is my best friend from elementary school. We were batchmates in Jose Rizal Elementary School at the time. I went to UP Prep in high school. He went to Philippine Science High School. But then we met up at UP in Diliman. And he was there during the rally in February 1971 in front of the entrance to the UP when something happened. He became the first victim of the rally. There was a professor from mathematics who wanted to infiltrate the rally because he wanted to go to have a class. This professor happened to fire shots from his rifle, and that wasn't enough. He ran out of bullets from the rifle. He got his pistol, and then did a few more shots, and that was when Pastor Messina, my classmate, was shot. So he ended up being sent to the infirmary. He did not want to go to the VA hospital because of the fact that he knows it's run by the military. But he eventually was transferred there because the infirmary is not equipped. And 3 days later, he died. After that, that's when I became more active in the demonstrations. I actually became a member of Kabataang Makabayan. So I was doing all of that thing while I was working as a student assistant, using all the mimeograph machine in the faculty department and making copies of the manifestos and the flyers that we produced. So I work more than 8 hours a day just so I can make those copies while the rest of the faculty are already out of the office. Up until 1972, I was actually became one of the officers of the UP Student Council before I graduated. And it was in 1972 that you all know martial law was declared. So, but this was the beginning of the EDSA revolution.
Mr. Joseph Tariosa, I understand you'd like to share something, your own experience.
In 1986, I was a reporter, police reporter of Manila Bulletin. So, we are not actually covering the military. We are in the fringes. All our stories are being inspected by General Menzi, the owner of the bulletin, before it comes out. And I noticed that most of our stories do not come out because it will displease Marcos. But what I noticed then was that prior to the EDSA, there were noise parades. You will wonder how those people are going around the city trying to encourage people to rise against Marcos. And during the day that, during the people power that ENRILE, Secretary ENRILE and General Ramos called out for help, I went to EDSA and I noticed that some of the young boys, actually teenagers or maybe college age students, were trying to organize an ROTC way of forming a military. They just go around and ask for able-bodied people if they can join us, or they can help them really just in case. So it was like guerrilla or militia type of formation on the spot. You will notice that they're forming a platoon and like company. And the other thing that I noticed, that I was in the desk of the bulletin on the night that Marcos was taken by helicopter. So the bulletin is in Intramuros. So the helicopter that came from Malacanang was crossing Top Avenue, and we heard the helicopter moving towards U.S. Embassy. So that was an indication that the staff in the bulletin were shouting, "Marcos is gone." So that was the only time that we realized that there was already a vacuum in Malacanang, and everybody was happy. And after that, the people power, I last covered the occupation of Manila Hotel. since I am a police reporter, our defense reporter then, Ding Marcelo, who was the sports editor, was asked by the Bulletin to cover the takeover of Manila Hotel by Tolentino. And Ding Marcelo was so scared. He said, I'm not going to cover there. I sent another police reporter, and I was about to leave the desk, and I was told, Joseph, you have to go to Manila Hotel, so you can cover it there. I said, what happens if the forces, the reformed armed forces will shoot it out with the loyalists who are holed up in Manila Hotel? You have to go there. So I had no choice. I had to go there, and it so happened that most of the leaders there of the loyalist forces, like Era, Spina, I think, and Era even told me, Tukayo, you are now the information secretary. I said, no. Mayor Estrada was the mayor of San Juan at the time, but he was part of the loyalist group with Governor Rodriguez of Rizal. I said, no, I'm just here to cover the event here. And they were, Jerry Spina was in communication with President Marcos in Hawaii over the phone in Manila Hotel. I don't know how they were able to get the phone of President Marcos. So that's my story, and thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to recall my days during time. Thank you. Bye.
Movement of Philippines was formed here in Chicago. Eventually, may dumating na mga exile tulad ni Jefferson Alvarez, dumating sa dito. And then again, Chicago made history in 1981, right after nung operasyon ni Senator Aquino sa Texas. Ang unang public speaking engagement niya, again, is in Chicago, sa isang Methodist church dito sa Rogers Park. And the church was full, and he spoke here, and he came here at least half a dozen times. And I would like to make a little note, kasi walang pera ang mga aktivista dito noon. Alam ni Ninoy yun, pagka pupunta dito, kaya nakikitira lang siya. Unlike ang Lapus na palagi nasa hotel, si Ninoy is more kind of ang mga sa tao, no? Nakikitira-tira lang siya sa mga activists dito. And in fact, on the fateful day of August 1983, na umuwi siya, si Cesar Arellano, who broke rank with the Manglapos group, member na siya nung Ninoy Aquino movement, yung nag-form sila dito, ano. And so nakiusap siya, Anong, pwede ba uuwi daw siya, pero ang last speaking engagement niya dito sa Chicago, pwede ba sa inyo naman siya? Kasi yung asawa ko, galit na, palagi na lamang daw kami ang host. Ayun, ano. Cesar Arellano is a good man. Nakulong siya nang dahil sa involvement niya na impreso yan because of his involvement in activism dito, ano? So, that did not happen, of course. Nag-demand change ang plano ni Ninoy at umuwi lang siya, and then, of course, that started yung mga demonstrasyon sa Pilipinas, ang pagkamatay ni Senator Aquino that led to 1986. Kaya lang ako masugid na one dito kasi tulad na na-announce, eventually there will be announcement here about an election. I passionately kind of appeal, especially for those who are now dual citizens or dual state Filipino, to do something about it, because there's some kind of, we know very well that there's some kind of evolution of this, some kumaliwa, kumanan, nagsamantala, ano. And one of the human rights lawyer na kasama ni Marinesa Gisag at saka ni Butch Aquino was of course one of the presidential candidates now, ano. And endorsing the son of the dictator that was kicked out on that day in EDSA, ano. And you can look back, ano ba ang nangyari? Ano ba ang legacy ng EDSA? ano ba ang kondisyon ng tao? In the end, goes out of question. This is not being celebrated as something na parang party sa EDSA malaki. Ano? Ang nangyari dito sa kondisyon ng ating bayang Pilipino. No? In May, there will be another election. And sino ba ang mga ganito? Grace po is the adopted daughter of a very much supporter ni Marcos, ang kasawang Fernando po at saka sa mga inaanak ng Marcos noon. Siya ang ngayon na kandidat po yun. And she is not shy being identified with the Marcoses as decent treating Ilocos. Of course, you are following the news. No? Somehow, itong election na ito, maraming koneksyon, whether it's Honasan, whether it is ENRILE, ano, na umaatake sa mga ating Pangulo ngayon. Ano. So, may koneksyon sa EDSA. So, I think if we have to honor the memory, the legacy of EDSA, we connect it on the present condition in the Philippines, on the things that will happen, and wherein we have a part na may magagawa tayo. We are still part of this EDSA revolution. Thank you.
Before Marshall was declared, we already knew it in the office. As a matter of fact, this is bad. The senators made all the employees and the staff to fill out a time sheet or time card that the Senate owes them some salaries. The lowest was up to 10,000 pesos at the time. That was there, and everybody signed up for that pay because my boss was the chairman of the finance committee. So he's got as God knows it, I was the only one who refused to sign that payroll. I said, no, that's cheating. I did not. So anyway, then later on, of course, the Marshall was declared. We lost our jobs. I had no job for maybe several months until finally I was hired by the DPI, Department of Public Information. Oh my God, you know what my job is? Censorship for all the newspapers that were later allowed, because after martial law, all the newspapers were closed down. Number one, the first one was Free Press to go and never come back because of principle on the part of the Free Press. They will never bow down to martial law. So anyway, that was my job, to censor the newspaper. I hated it. As a journalist myself, I hated it, but I had my job. And then later,
I was in Seattle, Washington, but I was visiting relatives, but I was very concerned because my family lived and still lives in St. Ignatius Village, which is right behind Camp Aguinaldo. And so it was very hard then for me to call the Philippines to find out if my family was okay, because they were right there. And when I finally got to talk to them, they'd say, oh yeah, we made sandwiches for all the people in EDSA, you know, but none of my brothers and sisters were allowed to go there. You know, they just stayed at home. And then there was a time during the 4 days when a house in White Plains was bombed, was hit, and completely destroyed. So I felt really concerned about that, about the safety of my family. They thought they wanted to go to a hotel because it wasn't safe anymore. They felt it wasn't safe, but then they just stayed, and they said, yeah, we learned how to get handkerchiefs and soak them in water with calamansi to prevent them from inhaling the gas, you know, when they were coming along Santolan. That's where the troops, apparently loyal to Marcos, attacked from, and that's right beside our subdivision. But then to answer the questions that were raised, so what is this now? So I still, you know, my family still lives in St. Ignatius, and all the news right now is about all the traffic closures that are happening, that they're planning because of the celebration. And it's like, my friends have already forgotten the relevance of that. It's all about, oh my gosh, the traffic, you know, avoid this, avoid that. This is the best way to get around. I mean, it's kind of sad, but you know, that's one answer. What is the meaning of this? Thank you.
Would you like to make?
Yeah, from the Philco.
I'm a little slow, but can I share two reflections of tonight? One is that there were thousands of people who died during the 16 years of martial law. They are not here to tell their stories. So in the quiet of your home, if you would say a prayer for those who have died. And these are really the movement people who created EDSA, right? So if you think about all these activists who, it wasn't only at UP, they were walking on Ascaraga, they came from Philippine College of Commerce and Pamantasan and so on. There were hundreds and hundreds of, where the consciousness of the country was really growing. Okay, so think about those who died. The second is, I brought a map because I couldn't find my picture book on EDSA. But if you think about, we are 7,107 islands right now. We are 100 million people, right? But where is the change? Where is the pagbabago that was put there on the where is the change? There's no structural change. The social classes are the same. The same elite people get elected year after year. And Bongbong Marcos, the next generation, is here running. So the contradiction is things are the same, yet they seem to be changing. That's all.
But if you notice from the presentations, two were directly involved in the event. Al and Mr. Buhay, really, they were directly on the ground. The others were atmospherics. But I will mention two events that I would say, if you graph them as if they were notes in a musical score, there will be the high points leading towards EDSA. The first is the 1978 elections, where then Aquino, who was then in jail, challenged Marcos. Yeah, that evening we are from Project 4, which was also directly affected by EDSA. You know, when I wanted to eat some banana Q, I'll go out in EDSA and savor it was fun, actually. According to Al, it was fun. There was fun in the corner of EDSA and Santolan. That's where I used to go in those 4 days. And that evening, it is as if the entire Metro Manila rose up in arms against Marcos. Those were the signs already that he was probably on his way out. And the other was the funeral of Ninoy. And in that particular instance, I was on the opposite side of the fence because I was an army officer before joining the EDSA. And I saw the funeral and I said to myself, this is the beginning of the end. And right in, it was either the 20th, I think it was on the 23rd, there was an international conference in the Philippines among economic ministers. And the acting minister at the time was Pacifico Castro. So I was in the Asia Pacific office, covering Southeast Asia, and I was among those assigned to send off one minister from Africa. He was the equivalent of the NEDA minister. So when we were in the old, it was called MIA then, Manila International Airport. One of the aircraft in the 700 Special Mission Wing, that's the mission wing, that's the wing that carried Marcos wherever he was. There were helicopters there, presidential aircraft was there. At least one of them, I think somebody, something in the account was showed it. One of the aircraft there was hit by one of the Rebel F-5s. And I saw in the eyes of that acting Minister Castro that his days in office were numbered. And then for some reason, because he knew I was in uniform 2 years before that, he called me and he said, Mr. Calonge, he said, yes sir, if you were still in the service today, he said, which side will you be on? And I said, I didn't blink for a minute, and I said, sir, I would surely be on the rebel side. And I wonder if he stayed in office longer, what would have happened to me. Because I was very frank in my answer to him. But anyway, what does this all mean? That was the dominating question that I hear. What does EDSA mean? Well, as a follower of international events, what happened at EDSA had seismic proportions. It shook the world. It shook the United States to the point that when Cory came here in '86 for the first time and spoke before a joint session of Congress, within seconds after she got out of the hall, she got $200 million for the Philippines. And one senator said it was the most expensive speech in history. It changed, it continued the tradition of peaceful change that were started by gurus like Gandhi, a David, as it were, espousing peace could kill a Goliath. And as history has shown, has proven eventually, many countries fell following EDSA. The most prominent I can think of is Poland, with the Solidarity movement under Lech Walesa, and then Romania, and then no less than the Soviet Union, that evolved into 15 states now, I think, sovereign states.
Is Germany.
Yeah, the most significant of all was Germany in November of 90 or 91.
Berlin Wall.
Yeah, Germany, the unification of Germany, which we also celebrate. So, but I don't know if that is credited to the Philippines, these changes, because scholarship in international relations or in history mentions EDSA only, if at all, tangentially. But we Filipinos know what happened. One larger question I would ask in my heart is, what if the rebel helicopters under General Sotelo, instead of their orders were to shoot the rebels at Krame. What if they fired rockets there? What would have happened? There would have been turmoil in the country. There would have been a civil war. There are people who think that a bloody war would be better for a country because it's a certain, it has a certain cathartic result that will actually unify the entire country. They're thinking more in terms of what happened to the United States after the Civil War, after the Civil Rights Movement here. I don't know if that's the right answer, but of course it's an academic question. The thing is, we have set a standard for the world.
Sundalo, naging ganitong bahagi ng mundo. Huwag nating payagan, umira lang dilim. Hingin ng bawat tao'y bigyan ng pansin. Magkakapatid lahat sa Panginoon. Ito'y lagi nating tatandaan. Pilipino sa mundo,
Videography, Editing and Reporting. This is Joseph Gilariosa of the journal Global Links in Chicago, Illinois.